Hello, this is Jay Mitchell. We are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. So first we have, moral tone of right-wing Redditors varies by context, but left-wingers' tone tends to stay steady, from scipost.org, posted by EmptyRow5585. And yeah, personally, I would say that, right-wing Redditors is kind of an oxymoron at this point. If anyone's even remotely right-leaning, they're getting banned and censored constantly on Reddit. So right-wing Redditors pretty much right-wing by Reddit standards is pretty much center-left even, I would say, by IRL standards. But yeah, I do think it's interesting how apparently, their tone tends to vary by context, but left-wingers' tone tends to stay steady. I think this is just how, it's pretty much when it comes to any scientific survey, you have to be a worry of how it's being used to push an agenda. And I think the agenda they're trying to push here is, well, left-wingers tend to be more consistent, while right-wingers tend to be less consistent, and that's personally not an agenda I personally care for. Anyone will justify saying whatever they want to at any moment. Sometimes it might be sometimes it might be consistent, sometimes it might not be. And yeah, a lot of people these days are very inconsistent, it seems, when it comes to politics. When their side does something, it's entirely justified. When the other side does the exact same thing, suddenly it's the worst thing ever. And that just goes to show you how, as I say, pretty much every post on the subreddit, no values, only teams. Then next we have, Hexif summoned military leaders to say FAFO in disturbing speech, from newrepublic.com, posted by Plasman30, and they added, so Hexif wants a white male military, so he's an asshole and an alcoholic. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for Hexif, just like I don't really care for Trump or pretty much anyone in this administration currently. But, if Hexif wants to go up there and grandstand, that's pretty much all politics is at this point, it's just grandstanding. And it's mostly just purely performative, I would say. And that's why it's kind of tiring to me. It's pretty much, it seems like the theater kids have pretty much taken over both the Republican and the Democratic parties, rather than the principled statesmen of old. And that's my thoughts on that issue. I personally, next we have Trump declaring war on United States cities. San Francisco and Chicago, New York, Los Angeles will straighten them out one by one. It will be a major part for some of the people in this room. It's a war too. It's a war from within. Posted by Ragnarok KXG, and that's a cross post from the LOL subreddit. And it looks like a video of Trump saying that during a speech on Fox News. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for that rhetoric. I think it's very inflammatory. But Biden had a ton of inflammatory rhetoric as well, like when he called MAGA a threat to the very soul of this country during his speech with a very disturbingly lit backdrop of Independence Hall. And, Reddit didn't care for that. Reddit thought, oh, that's entirely justified. But the orange man, he says some divisive rhetoric, and it's the worst thing ever. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for it. But, I'm pretty sure if Joe Biden was up there saying, this is a war for democracy, this is a war for our republic, Reddit will think it's completely justified. And that just goes to show you, as pretty much every post in the subreddit, no values, only teams. Next we have the dumbest immigration policy for reasons that J.D. Vance would not agree with. He wants more government restrictions, even if the immigration policy is the strictest it's ever been. Posted by Historical Donut 6758, and that looks like a screenshot of a post from Joe Rogan Podcast News, and that post was Joe Rogan on J.D. Vance. He's great, thank God for that guy. He's so good at dismantling those dopey people. She was like, this is a country built on immigrants. He's like, yes, that doesn't mean that 240 years later we have to have the dumbest immigration policy possible. And then the OP added, it's mind-boggling how many angry people think we have an open borders immigration policy. Joe Rogan's probably no exception. And yeah, personally, I don't think our immigration policy is completely open borders, but they did seem to let a lot of migrants slip by under Biden, and Trump's just slightly tougher than him, and Reddit thinks it's literally fascism. So yeah, I personally would agree with Rogan's take here. Just because America is a country built on immigrants doesn't mean you have to have the dumbest immigration policy possible. I do think, the purely libertarian argument is for open borders, but with the current welfare state in place, and how a lot of the immigrants are going to leech off that. I personally think that you do have an argument for immigration, for being anti-immigrant libertarian society. It's like it's like in Springfield, Ohio. When you have 10,000 Haitian immigrants just sent to your town, that's going to disrupt kind of the community and the community's flow. But ultimately it just comes down to who has the ability to do what. Personally, I think the libertarian position of immigration is move wherever you want to, just don't hurt anyone else, and just leave me alone when I ask to be left alone. And that's personally how I see it. So yeah, personally, if the Democrats want to bus immigrants to wherever, that they should be able to justify. If the Republicans want to bus immigrants to wherever, they can justify. I think the libertarian position is, get the state out of immigration, just like the state out of everything else. Let immigrants move wherever they want to, and if you don't like it, that's fine. But, they shouldn't be entitled to any government benefits if they are illegal immigrants. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump tells generals the military will be used to fight enemy within. Isn't there a law against that? From MSN.com, posted by Puffin Fan. And that's cross was from the law subreddit. And yeah, as I said earlier, I don't really care for Trump and his rhetoric about the enemy within, but Biden had pretty much the exact same rhetoric calling MAGA a threat to the soul of the country, and Reddit didn't care. So, it's just, Reddit only cares that the outgroup's doing it. I'm pretty sure if Biden was up there calling MAGA the enemy of Finn, and we have to go after him as possible, even put him in camps, I'm sure it would be justifying. I'm sure the front page of Reddit would be celebrating MAGA being thrown into camps. But Reddit, it just goes to show you these people have no morals other than in-group good, out-group bad. I'm sure when the second the Blue Party takes power again, Reddit will agree with everything they say and justify all their authoritarian actions. But now now that the red team's in the position of authority, suddenly any authoritarian actions are literally fascism by default. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Senator Ted Cruz. How about we all come together and say, let's stop attacking pedophiles? Posted by MTRO5585. And that looks like a clip of Ted Cruz saying that on C-SPAN Free. And yeah, personally, I think that's just a gaffe. And personally, I'm sure if a Democratic politician would have said that, Reddit would agree it's a gaffe and downvote it relentlessly. But, since it's a Republican politician saying it, suddenly it's the worst thing ever, and the GOP is the party of pedophiles. Personally, my thoughts on pedophiles are, you got some in the Republican Party, you got some in the Democratic Party, you have them in pretty much every party, including the Libertarian Party. But, I do think that the left is the one who is trying to normalize pedophilia with stuff like this is stuff like calling non-offending pedophiles minor attracted persons. Pedophilia is, in my opinion, something that should be stigmatized, and you should be called a pedophile if you are one, even if you're not an active offender. Just because if you want to use the label minor attracted person, that's fine. But that personally goes. I personally think that's kind of bullshit, and will vocalize as such. And yeah. I think it's interesting how they're trying to sweep all that under the rug now. I saw a tweet from Shioned recently. It was a retweet of a Redux, and that was it was. Let's see. Looks like it's deleted, but yeah, it was like the Pistachio, which was a pro-pedophile organization that was really pushing all the MAP stuff. They got rid of the organization because the country's climate is changing, and yeah, it just goes to show you how the Democrats are trying to sweep all the MAP stuff under the rug, and I think that's important to remember as well. You can't let them forget all the things they were pushing when they were in power that now they're trying to sweep under the rug. All the woke shit, like sexualized drag queens for children, or like books like Genderqueer with a woman with a transgender jerking off of a strap-on penis, or what was the other thing they were pushing? Oh yeah, maps. I said that earlier, but they were off. Yeah, and all that shit. You can't let them, and transgender women in sports, that's another one. You can't let them off the hook of that they were pushing all this, and now that they're not in power, they're trying to sweep it under the rug and saying, oh, we're the voice of reason. Well, in reality, neither major party is the voice of reason. That the only the party that's out of power is because they're not in power currently. When the other party's in power, they're going to justify whatever they want to, and on the Democratic Party, they'll justify whatever the woke narrative is, and the Republican Party will justify whatever the MAGA narrative is, and that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Trump in mid-dementia speech says he doesn't like modern shifts because stealth is ugly. I don't like some shifts you're doing aesthetically, posted by Donald Key, and that's crosspost from the boomers being fooled subreddit. Epstein boomer tells top military commanders Quanco he doesn't like modern shifts because stealth is ugly. I don't like some of the shifts you're doing aesthetically. And yeah, personally, I think that's just Trump just kind of being an idiot, but that's pretty much been Trump's whole MO since he started running for his first campaign back in 2016. And Reddit always takes the bait every single time, and eventually fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Fool me 100,000 times, and I just might deserve to be fooled. And that's very much where the position Reddit's at with the orange man at this point. When you take his bait every single time, you're just gonna play right into his hand. If Reddit was smart, they would ignore Donald Trump as much as possible. It's like the old episode of Simpsons where all the giant mascots came to life, and then the response to them was just don't look, and they all just rusted up and faded away. But Reddit, they always need to look and talk about Trump since he's the president. And if nothing would hurt that guy more than not talking about him and not falling for the bait every single time. But of course, Reddit, they don't seem to have that much intelligence when it comes to that. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have Republicans refuse to swear a newly elected Democrat, delaying success of Epstein petition from thehill.com, posted by Donald Key. And yeah, personally, as I said in previous episodes, this is making it sound like all Republicans are against the newly elected Democrat. Well, in reality, some of the Republicans who have been hardest in going after the Epstein files, like Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, they probably want that Democrat sworn in, but it's Reddit, so they didn't make it sound like everyone in the out group believes the exact same thing, even though that's not the case when it comes to politics. In reality, in politics, everyone believes in different things. No one's going to 100% agree with everyone every single amount of the time, and that's important to remember. But on Reddit, it's always out group believes everything. Everything that Trump says. In group is principled Trump resistors, and yeah, that's just not the case. A lot of people these days on both sides of the aisle don't have principles. They just have whatever their team says. But Reddit would never call the Democrats out for that. It's saying, oh, all Republicans are inherently Trump supporters. Well, in reality, Thomas Massie, Trump's going after him for Epstein and being against the big beautiful bill, and Reddit doesn't care because it goes against their all the outgroup is all the same narrative. Next, we have generals reportedly criticized being flown from around the world to meeting of Hexif, total waste of money, from LatinTimes.com, posted by Donald Key. And yeah, I personally would agree with that. It could have just been, I feel like a lot of these meetings, I think if Pete Hegseth just wanted to, he could have recorded himself grandstanding and sent it to as a video to all the military people. But these days, it seems like you gotta have as much of these massive events as possible, and that just kind of tires you after a while. If you want to do all these massive events and fly all the generals from all over the world, that's fine. But eventually, it just kind of just gets tiring, especially when the event is just a circle to jerk yourself off. Next, we have Trump urges military to use U.S. cities as urban warfare training grounds, posted by CH4Locks, crosspost from the LOL subreddit. They really use the LOL subreddit a lot. And yeah, personally, I don't think that's right, but I'm sure that if it was Biden doing it, it would be, Biden would be having rural warfare training grounds, I guess, since, rural's more MAGA, urban's more woke. And yeah, personally, I don't really care for either using urban warfare training grounds or rural warfare training grounds, but ultimately, if Trump wants to label whatever he wants to label anything, that's on him. He always likes to get a rise out of people so they don't stop talking about him, and Reddit, as I said previously, doesn't seem to realize that. Next, we have ICE arrested a U.S. citizen twice during Alabama construction site raids. Now he's suing from Reason.com, posted by Jet A. Porcupine. And yeah, personally, I don't think that's right. But regardless, ultimately, since the government has legal monopoly use of force, they can arrest you for whatever reason they want to. If they think you're an illegal immigrant, they can arrest you. And oftentimes, there's nothing you can do about it. And since they control the court system as well, your lawsuit back when you get the chance to, might not be effective because the state controls everything. And when the state controls everything, it has no reason to find itself accountable if it feels like it. And that's my thoughts on that issue. And then we got a bonus post I made to the Libertarian Party USA subreddit, Libertarian Perspectives on the Upcoming Government Shutdown. And I said, personally, I think the term itself is false advertising. The vast majority of government services like the police and public transportation are still going to be operating. The worst that usually ends up happening is that they end up putting some barriers at the national parks so that you can easily walk around if you feel like it. The real tragedy is that they always end up opening it back up again. Thoughts. And yeah, that's my thoughts there. I personally don't really care for shutting down the government. I think that's kind of a waste of taxpayer money, but, personally, I do think, if the government wants to justify it, the government can justify whatever it wants to. I do think it's interesting how a lot of progressives say, oh, Trump is literally Hitler, but we need to reopen the government as soon as possible. I think that's some cognitive dissonance on par with Trump is literally Hitler, but we need to ban guns. If you really think Trump is Hitler, you should be probably celebrating the government shutdown. But in reality, it's people are going to contradict themselves constantly when it comes to politics, depending on whatever the narrative is. And that's true pretty much regardless of wherever you're down the political spectrum. And yeah, I think we're going to wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.